Walk into a massive luxury home, and there is a good chance you will find a room the owner barely ever enters. It might be hidden behind a glass wall in the basement. It might sit beneath the kitchen. It might have a temperature-controlled door, rows of dark wood racks, soft amber lights, and enough bottles to supply a restaurant for years. A wine cellar. On a mansion tour, it looks like the ultimate rich person feature. The house has a pool, a gym, a movie theater, maybe a bowling alley, and then the camera reaches the underground wine room. That is when people really understand the house is expensive. Because a wine cellar does not just say somebody has money. It says somebody has money to spend on a room designed for a hobby they may not even have. And that is the strange part. Some wealthy homeowners are serious wine collectors. They know exactly what is on every shelf, how old it is, what it is worth, and when it should be opened. But a lot of luxury wine cellars are built for a completely different reason. They are there because expensive houses need expensive-looking rooms. They are there because an empty basement feels ordinary, but a glass wine room makes the same basement look like it belongs in a $20 million listing. And they are there because wine might be one of the easiest ways to make a house look richer than it actually is. This is why rich homes keep building wine cellars nobody uses. The first thing to understand is that a real wine cellar is not just a room full of bottles. Wine does not love heat, sunlight, vibration, or huge swings in temperature. For long-term storage, collectors try to keep bottles in a dark, stable environment, usually around 55 degrees Fahrenheit, with enough humidity to keep natural corks from drying out. That is why old wine cellars were often underground. Long before modern cooling systems, a basement was one of the few parts of a home that stayed relatively cool and steady throughout the year. The ground did the work. Above ground, the temperature could go from blazing hot in the summer to freezing in the winter. Below ground, the temperature changed much more slowly. For somebody storing wine, that mattered. A good cellar protected bottles from direct light, heat, and sudden changes that could age the wine too quickly or ruin a cork. So the original idea was practical. A house had an underground storage room. The room happened to be cool and dark. People stored wine there because it made sense. But then luxury real estate got involved, and a practical underground storage room slowly turned into a status symbol. Now, a modern wine cellar can have hand-finished walnut racks, stone walls, climate control systems, glass doors, custom lighting, security locks, tasting tables, built-in bars, and enough space for thousands of bottles. At that point, the room is no longer only built to protect wine. It is built to be seen. Think about the difference between a regular refrigerator and a professional kitchen. Both can keep food cold, but one looks like it belongs in a normal home, while the other makes people imagine a celebrity chef lives there. A wine fridge can store wine properly. A wine cellar makes the owner look like the kind of person who buys wine by the case, hosts private dinners, and has somebody recommend bottles that cost more than a car payment. That image is valuable, especially when a luxury home is trying to separate itself from every other luxury home. Because once a house gets expensive enough, having a nice kitchen is not special anymore. Every mansion has a nice kitchen. Every mansion has a giant primary bedroom. Every mansion has a pool, a gym, and a big outdoor area. The builder needs features that make people stop during a showing. The kind of things an agent can point at and say, this is not just a house, this is an estate. A wine cellar is perfect for that. It is easy to understand visually. Rows of bottles look expensive even if the viewer knows nothing about wine. The room is usually underground, which makes it feel hidden and exclusive. The lighting is warm. The racks are custom. The glass doors look like a vault. And because most people do not have one, it instantly creates distance between an ordinary home and a rich person home. That is the real product, not the wine. The feeling. A luxury wine cellar gives a buyer a story to tell. They can say the house has a 14-seat theater. They can say it has a resort pool, and then they can say it has a temperature-controlled wine cellar downstairs. That one sentence makes the house sound more complete, more polished, and more expensive, even if the owner only drinks a few bottles a year. And that happens more often than people think. A huge wine room can look like somebody's lifelong collection, but in many homes, the bottles are mostly decoration. Maybe the owner buys a few nice cases for parties. Maybe a designer fills the shelves before the listing photos are taken. Maybe the bottles belong to the cellar, and the racks stay behind when they leave. Maybe the room is packed once, photographed once, and then barely touched for years. Because owning a wine cellar and actively collecting wine are two completely different things. Real collectors are serious about storage. They care about temperature. They care about humidity. They care about where a bottle came from, how it was transported, and whether it has been stored properly for years. If somebody owns rare wine as an investment, the story gets even more serious. For high-value bottles, professional storage can matter because buyers and auction houses care about provenance. They want to know where the wine has been. They want proof that it was not sitting in a hot garage, a sunny dining room, or an unreliable basement for 10 years. That is why some serious collectors do not even keep their most valuable bottles at home. They use professional climate-controlled storage facilities. The wine is protected, the history of the bottle is documented, and the collection is not sitting underneath a house where one broken cooling unit could create a very expensive problem. So the person who really understands wine might not need a massive glass cellar at home at all. They may need a smaller, well-designed storage space for bottles they actually plan to drink. That creates the weird contradiction. The biggest wine rooms are not always built for the people who care most about wine. Sometimes they are built for the people who care most about what a wine room says, and there is nothing wrong with that. A house does not need to be practical in every room. Nobody needs a 12-car garage either. Nobody needs a bathroom with 2 showers, a fireplace, and a chandelier. Nobody needs a theater with recliners arranged like a private cinema. But luxury homes are not built around what people need. They are built around what makes a property feel impossible to replace. The wine cellar does that better than almost any other room. It turns a basic basement into a destination. Imagine 2 expensive homes that cost the same amount. The first one has a finished basement, nice floors, some recessed lighting, maybe a small bar and an extra bathroom. The second house has the exact same amount of basement space, but one wall is filled with glowing wine racks behind glass. The second home instantly feels more valuable. It may not actually be more useful. It may not even cost that much more to build compared with the price of the whole property. But it photographs better, it feels more customized, and it gives buyers a reason to remember it. That last part matters more than people realize. Luxury real estate is not only about square footage, it is about emotional proof. A buyer needs to walk through a house and feel like they are getting something rare. A wine cellar is visual proof that the home has crossed into another level. You do not have to know anything about Cabernet, Burgundy, Champagne, or vintage years to understand the message. This room is built for people who are not worried about using every square foot efficiently, and the design makes that message even stronger. A basic wine fridge can sit under a kitchen counter. It is practical, it is small, it does its job, but it does not make anyone stop and stare. A giant underground cellar does. That is why builders make them look dramatic. They use glass walls so guests can see the bottles before they even enter. They add stone because stone feels old and expensive. They use warm lights because warm lights make every bottle look more valuable. They add giant tasting tables, leather chairs, and heavy doors. Sometimes the door looks like it belongs on a bank vault, not because wine needs a vault door, but because the door itself tells people the room is important. The funny thing is that the more impressive the room becomes, the less likely it is to be used casually. A person might grab a bottle from a kitchen wine fridge every weekend, but a giant cellar with custom lighting, a lock, a controlled temperature, expensive racks, and a marble tasting table can start feeling like a display room. You do not want to mess it up. You do not want random guests wandering around it. You do not want kids touching bottles. You do not want the collection to look empty. So instead of becoming part of everyday life, it becomes part of the house's image. A room you show people, a room you mention, a room you use when people are over, and then, most of the time, a room you walk past. There is also a practical reason these cellars can become annoying. They are not simple. A real wine room needs more than pretty wood racks. It needs insulation. It needs a sealed environment. It needs climate control. It needs to manage temperature changes and humidity. It needs lighting that does not heat the room too much. And it needs equipment that keeps running when the rest of the house is hot, cold, empty, or being renovated. If that system fails, the room can become a problem fast. A normal basement can survive being slightly warmer for a week. A carefully stored wine collection may not be as forgiving. The bottles may still look perfect from the outside, but wine is not a decorative object. It is something that can be damaged by years of bad storage. That means a wine cellar adds another system to maintain, another machine to repair, another specialty feature a future buyer has to understand. And this is where luxury features can become dangerous for resale. A wine cellar is amazing when the buyer wants one. If they love entertaining, collect wine, or simply want the room for the image, it can be a huge selling point. But if the buyer does not care about wine, they may see something different. They may see a cold, specialized room they have to maintain. They may see wasted square footage. They may see racks they will need to remove. They may see a basement that could have been a gym, a game room, a guest suite, or storage. This is the trap with over-customized luxury homes. The feature that made the original owner feel special can make the next buyer feel limited. A huge wine cellar is not like a kitchen. Everybody needs a kitchen. It is not like a bedroom. Everybody understands why bedrooms exist. A wine room is a very specific dream, and the more expensive and dramatic it gets, the narrower the group of buyers becomes. That is why some of the most expensive homes have rooms that look incredible online but become hard to explain in person. A bowling alley can be fun, but how often will somebody use it? A giant aquarium can look insane, but who is maintaining it? An indoor pool can be impressive, but what happens when the humidity starts attacking the house? A wine cellar has the same problem, just in a quieter way. It looks sophisticated, it feels timeless, and it is easier to maintain than an indoor pool. But it can still become a beautiful room nobody actually needs. So why do builders keep adding them? Because luxury homes are not sold like normal homes. When someone buys a regular house, they are often thinking about daily life. How close is it to work? How many bedrooms does it have? Is the kitchen big enough? Where will the kids play? Where will the car go? But when someone buys an estate, especially one that costs several $1 million, the basics are already assumed. Of course it has enough bedrooms. Of course it has a beautiful kitchen. Of course it has a garage. The question becomes, what makes this house worth choosing over another expensive house? The wine cellar is one answer. It gives the listing a headline. It gives the real estate video a moment. It gives the builder a feature that sounds expensive without requiring an entire second house. And it gives buyers the feeling that they are buying into a lifestyle, not just buying walls and land. That is the real reason the cellar keeps getting built. It sells potential. Maybe the buyer will start collecting wine. Maybe they will host dinners downstairs. Maybe they will open rare bottles on special occasions. Maybe the room will become the centerpiece of every party. Or maybe they will never use it. But when they buy the house, they are buying the possibility that they could. And wealthy buyers pay a lot for possibility. They buy a home gym they may use twice a month. They buy a guest house for visitors who come once a year. They buy giant dining rooms for dinners that only happen at Christmas. They buy outdoor kitchens that sit untouched through half the year. The wine cellar belongs in the same category. It is not always a practical room. It is an aspirational room. It says this house is ready for a life that may or may not ever happen. That is why the room is often more important when the house is for sale than after the sale is finished. During a showing, everything is perfect. The lights are on, the bottles are lined up, the glass is clean, the wood racks are full. The room feels private and expensive. A buyer walks in and instantly imagines themselves becoming the kind of person who owns a cellar like this. That feeling can be powerful. Real estate agents understand that people do not only buy what a home is, they buy what living there says about them. A wine cellar says the owner has taste. It says they entertain. It says they understand quality. It says the house is built for more than normal life, even when none of that is actually true. And that is why the room survives. The wine cellar is not just storage, it is a prop in the luxury home fantasy. A very expensive, climate-controlled, beautifully lit prop. Of course, for some people, it is much more than that. A real collector might know every bottle on the shelf. They might keep detailed records. They might buy wines specifically to age them. They might host tastings, pair bottles with meals, and actually use the space exactly as it was designed. For them, the room makes perfect sense. But those owners are not the reason you keep seeing cellars in homes where nobody seems to drink wine. The bigger reason is much simpler. A mansion needs features that make it feel like a mansion, and almost nothing says private wealth faster than an underground room filled with things you do not need. So, the next time you see a luxury house with a massive wine cellar, do not just think about the bottles. Think about the message. The cellar is there to tell you that the owner can afford a room for something they might never use. It is there to make an empty basement feel like a private club. It is there to turn a normal house tour into a story. And in the world of luxury real estate, that story can be worth more than the wine itself.